Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Introspection. I'm your host, Amy Lindner-Lesser, and I'm here today with Catherine Avery, who is a certified neurodiversity coach, speaker, and the founder of Catherine Avery ADHD Coaching. She helps Neuro-Zesty midlife women, I love that word, often juggling businesses, caregiving, and a million other responsibilities to stop spiraling, start thriving, and finally build a life that actually fits. Drawing on her SENSE method, which stands for sleep, exercise, nutrition, systems, and environment, Catherine guides clients to create ADHD friendly structures that protect their energy, restore balance, and replace overwhelm with clarity. Late diagnosed herself, Catherine understands the grief, relief, and self discovery that come with finally seeing your brain clearly. Her trauma informed, shame free approach blends practical strategies with deep empathy, empowering clients to own their own brilliance without burning out. She has spoken at the International Conference on ADHD and is known for her warm humor, real talk honesty, and belief that pausing isn't a luxury, it's a power move. Isn't that a great idea? So help me welcome Catherine. Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner-Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great.
There were a few things in your bio that really spoke to me. Well, number one is I love the term Neuro-Zesty. It certainly takes a term that has had some negative connotations, scary connotations, and I'm not sure about the timing, but I would say having to do with women, it's a more recent diagnosis. I know when my kids, well, even centuries ago when I was growing up, the only kids that were labeled as ADD without the hyperactivity were boys.
Correct.
And they were always the disruptors. You never heard the positive aspects of ADHD. And it's only since I've been an adult that I've seen girls and women being diagnosed.
Yes. And I'm getting to see that much younger generations are getting diagnosed much earlier, partly because research, science, doctors, knowledge, partly because, well, more so what happens, I should rephrase this, is that what happens with a lot of women who are moms is they find out that they have ADHD because their kids got a diagnosis. So they look and they say something like, and this is my story, I remember having those struggles in middle school. I'm going to pull out my old report cards and look at them, and then I'm going to weep. And I'm going to weep, and this is a true story, because how did they miss it? How did they not see it? And before anyone says, oh, you're blaming your parents, you're blaming school, I'm not blaming anyone, because nobody knew. They just didn't know. But as I became an adult and people in my world had seen things like that, how did they miss it? It was so incredibly obvious to me once I opened things up and saw things like this one was the one that hurt my soul. With concentrated effort, could be a great student. My dream was National Honor Society. I had all these big academic dreams. I'm actually considered what they call 2E, which is twice exceptional, which means that technically I'm very, very bright. I went to very good schools. I did B plus. I could have been an A student, but I could never find my homework. I would get distracted in class and be doodling. I would, if it was boring, forget about it. Like, the most interesting part of ADHD, and let's just throw out the whole name because it's dreadful. I mean, attention deficit. We have tons of attention on what we care about. I'm going to get to that in a sec. And hyperactivity disorder. I'm okay with the hyperactive part. I'm combined type. Inattentive type is a different ball of wax. They might like a different term. But disorder, I'm a little blunt. I'm just going to say bite me. Like, I don't consider it a disorder. I find it challenging. I find it sometimes to be a struggle, but I don't want people to feel like just because they have a different kind of brain, a uniquely wired brain, that there's something fundamentally wrong or broken about them, which is like how I grew up, right? Because there was no other messaging. I mean, clearly something was wrong with me. No one could possibly say, oh, there was something wrong with the system. We thrive in what we're fascinated by. I'm going to do one more story and then I'll let you get to a next question. Welcome to ADHD land, where we just like a little locomotive. My daughter is studying criminology, human behavior, sociology, psychology. This all came out of the summer after her freshman year, by which point we had some serious supports in place to help her, and she's inattentive. I call her my sloth on the sofa. So, and I mean that with the world's greatest fondness, truly. But she really is like a little sloth on the sofa, I swear to God. So she, that summer, I was like, I got this gal, and she's going to come and take you 2 afternoons a week to the beach. It was COVID times, so you couldn't go anywhere. So it was going to be like, take you to the park. You can get out your camera. You can take photographs. She's very artsy, things like that, because I was working full time. And not only was I working full time, but I was kind of scrambling, right? The pandemic was this moment where all of us had to kind of shift our businesses to online. So it was this major shift for me, and I was kind of full on in it, right? She says, I don't want a babysitter. I'm 14. I'm too old for a babysitter. And I was like, it's not really a babysitter, it's a driver. It's not to take you places. She was the gal that was 24, so it was someone young and fun. I mean, I'm almost 60 with a 20-year-old. I'm not young and fun. I guess I'm fun, but I'm not very young. So that summer, she watched a lot of TV, and I had to have like you have to go outside for a 20-minute rule, because it was just sloth on the sofa. And so while she was on the sofa, she was watching CSI, Blacklist, NCIS, all these different shows. And she kept saying, Mom, like, I figure these people out. Like, I'm really interested in human behavior. I'm interested in why criminals do this stuff. And she just like zoomed in on it and said, I want to work for the FBI. And I said, well, if you want to work for the FBI, a couple things. One, you're going to have to get your grades way up. Your academics are going to have to really improve. And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Finally, I'm going to get her to really focus in on her academics, which she graduated high school with a 4.1. She did fine with her academics. And the second thing I said was this, any kind of drug conversation we have to have is very simple. You can't, because you can't get into the FBI. So just don't do drugs. Next. She's like, I know, Mom, I know. So I got lucky in that the career she was interested in was one that allowed me to have like a fairly easy to deal with kid. But the important part of this is more that we ADHDers are interest based. See, I do come back. And when we're interest based, we go hog wild on the thing, whatever the thing is, and we get incredibly good at it. It's when we have to do things like, for me, taxes, like stick pins in my eyes, please. God bless accountants. I don't know how they do it. That's not going to happen, right? I'm just not going to do it. So that's a little bit on ADHD, just so people who are not neurodivergent have a sense. And obviously, there's other neurodivergencies like being on the spectrum. I've worked with clients who have dyslexia or dyscalculia. I work with a lot of clients who their official diagnosis is anxiety, and they're suspecting there's something underneath there, like ADHD.
Well, I can tell you with my younger daughter, when she got into school, refused to memorize anything. So when it came to times tables, Nope.
Mm,
She somehow, and I don't understand this at all, she was able to do the addition of multiplication in her head
yeah,
faster than somebody else could tell you the number that they memorized by rote.
right,
She could regurgitate lines from almost every movie she had ever seen. Of
right.
course, the movies she liked, she watched 400,000 times. I have a last name that's complicated. And she was having a really hard time as a little kid remembering how to spell it. She knew
Mm,
all her letters, she knew how to write them, but she couldn't remember. So, what I finally did when I realized that she could regurgitate song lyrics was I put it to the theme song from Nestle's.
there you
So
go.
we did Lindnerlesser.
Nice.
And there it is. I mean, she almost never remembered the hyphen because I hadn't put it into the song. But
Right.
but it was like, okay, I'm fine.
That's how I know the Greek alphabet because there's a thing we learned when I was about 12 at camp. One of our counselors was in college and taught us, in essence, a drinking song. We were not drinking, maybe hot cocoa, but taught us as like drinking a song of the Greek alphabet because, of course, you need to know that for being in a sorority or a fraternity or whatnot. So I know the Greek alphabet for absolutely no reason other than I can sing it. If you
And you
ask
will
me,
never forget it.
I got nothing. I can't say it, but I can sing it, and I won't.
And I've diagnosed myself.
Mm,
Um, I did not have trouble in school at all. However, where I had the trouble was in focusing if I wasn't interested.
right.
And probably 95% of my report cards came back saying, she's too talkative. One of the teachers wrote, as amiable as her name and as talkative.
I'm
That was,
laughing only because same, and often we'll see ADHD in women or young girls as a hyperactive version of ADHD, as this going, and also as a lot of things happening in our heads. So what I have found is I've really got to slow stuff down. I joke that it's like my brain has 50 tabs open at any given time, and I'm going to help my clients focus to one tab at a time. So I'd have to do a lot of like brain dumping. I have to take stuff and just dump it on a piece of paper and get it out of my head. So talking quite a bit, doing what I just did there, right? My brain was already going to the next 65 things, and I need to bring it back and slow it down because my brain is going way faster than my mouth. My mouth cannot keep up with my brain. So when I was dealing with a therapist who had ADHD, who had diagnosed me as depression caused by anxiety, primarily anxiety, he would look at me and say, "But you're so super fast. You're quick on your feet. You're lightning fast. There's no way you have ADHD, except that is ADHD. That is a component possibly of ADHD. I'm not a doctor and play one on TV."
and
So,
what's so sad to me was with my daughter, and I know that this happens with many other children, they're told that they're stupid, they're
mm,
dumb, they can't learn. And it was finally the psychologist who diagnosed her who said, there's nothing wrong with you. You are
right,
extremely bright. The problem is they don't want to teach you the way you need to be taught.
exactly.
And it wasn't until she kept failing one subject, and it was a different subject each time.
Wow.
It didn't matter. And she said, Mom, I can't do more than three major subjects.
Oh, yeah.
It's too much for me. So I remember sitting at a school meeting and she said, well, I guess the next one will be social studies. You're next for me to flunk.
Yeah.
And thankfully, when the psychologist told her that, she was like, oh, really? By taking it off of her, she
Mm,
realized, and it's true, many, if not most, because I'm talking from the top of my head, I just make things up. But many people who are diagnosed with ADHD are actually smarter than other people because they've managed to figure out how to get through things.
Right.
with, I don't want to call it a disability, but with this challenge.
Right.
And it is a challenge. I know for Maya, after she graduated high school, which she didn't, she did a GED and passed it on the first time. And anybody who's ever looked at GEDs knows how difficult a GED is. Um, she went and decided to do a paralegal training.
Mm,
And she did it in the evenings, and she took two courses each term. They were shorter, but longer classes, shorter terms. And she aced everything because she didn't have to spread her attention out.
right.
And I was like, I wish we had known that. I might have been able to convince her to try to go to college and do a college that had trimesters.
Right.
She would have been
Maybe
perfect.
I got lucky because we had trimesters in high school, so
Oh,
that may have helped me in getting through. Because I went to a private school, so we were on a trimester system. My going to my daughter again, and this will be the last time I do this to her, is because I'm sure, likes her privacy. She is currently taking kind of like 4.5 classes right now instead of 5, and she's a junior in college. She'd come in with a whole bunch of credits and then decided to take a summer abroad program in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. And so she has all these extra credits and she could graduate a semester early. And she said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Oh, take one less class, one fewer class every single semester for the rest of the way." I said, "It's going to get hard. It's college just gets harder." And she does have to write a massive thesis her senior year that she's doing the research for and putting together now. So it's a 2-year project. So I said, 4 classes. And really, technically, that fifth one is like a 1 credit honors class, right? The one that's getting her prepared for the thesis. I said, "You've got these extra credits. Enjoy college. Have time to do others." She works part time. She works in security and risk analysis. What? Um,
she's preparing to capture all of those criminals.
right? Yes. I mean, good for her. I just look at that. That sounds fascinating. I have no idea what that is, but good for you. Which is fine because that's not my area of expertise. It's not where I'm putting my brain power. But one thing I find really interesting is my mother's always been fascinated by the brain. I'm fascinated by the brain. And I mean, hey, I'm an ADHD coach. I kind of need to be fascinated by the brain. Now, my daughter's fascinated by behavioral science, et cetera. And my niece is studying to get her PhD in research and stuff in whole being, well-being, neuroscience. I don't even know, but we're all apparently brain people. So none of this is about grief, but it does lay all the groundwork for talking about what it means to grieve.
So let's go there.
Life quakes or life transitions and the aftershocks that follow are something we all experience. A life quake can stem from the heartbreaking grief that arises from the loss of a loved one or the disorientation felt when life suddenly shifts due to the loss of a job, relationship, identity, or health challenge. Learning to navigate these transitions with mindfulness, grace, and self-compassion is the key to finding your way back to joy, happiness, and inner peace. Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist and Certified Life Transition Coach, Amy Lindner-Lesser, MSW, expertly supports clients to navigate their life quakes and transitions with warmth, kindness, and grace. Learning to accept support as you navigate your way through the aftershocks is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. Learn more at introspection.com. That's introspection.com.
So I looked at my diagnosis. So I'm going to go back. And to go back, I have to go to cancer. So I was 49 years old with a 10-year-old and had a unusual scan or whatever, needed a biopsy. That was late August. The biopsy was going to be after Labor Day. We had a vacation planned in where I now live, which is Fenwick Island, Delaware. So this is where we used to come. So we were down here And my husband and I were the sword of Damocles, with nobody outside of us knowing that I was going to have this biopsy. And it was an incredibly terrifying, stressful time. And then I had the biopsy. And then on Friday, September 11th, at 5:50 p.m., the time actually does matter, it's 10 minutes to 6 p.m., prior to, I apologize, it was either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur weekend, I don't know which, Sunday to Monday. So not a lot of doctors open and things on Monday. And at 10 of 6 at night, I get a phone call from Dr. McGivens, who was that's not accurate, but that's all right, my radiologist. I've forgotten, I'm getting the names confused. The person who did my scans and the biopsy. And he called and he said a whole bunch of things. And the only word I heard, and it was a 4-word diagnosis, the only word I heard was the technical medical term that just went right out of my head, thanks to ADHD and aging, for cancer. And I just went, there was no sound, no nothing. I had no idea what was going on. And however many seconds later, felt like 3 years, I said to the doctor, I'm very, very sorry, but I said, I have no idea anything you just said. Let me get a pad of paper and a pen, and can you start over? Because all I got so far is I've got breast cancer. And he said, well, that's a good story. That is what you have. Like, pad and pen, please. And this is back in the days where I didn't know I had ADHD and I was managing me. Like, everything to me was about managing me. How do I manage me and my broken brain? Okay. It wasn't broken, but I didn't know that. So, wrote everything down. And I said to the doctor, this is why the time is important. I said, well, great. You told me this, and now I can't even reach out to a doctor until Tuesday. and I might have said something about, the best doctors are Jewish. Sorry, not sorry. So that is not really true, but in the moment, you're using humor because, right, you've been knocked over by this terrible, terrifying diagnosis. We have plans to go out with friends that night. Oh, and the other funny thing I said, well, at least you didn't screw up a different day. You told me on 9/11. Because I had a really bad 9/11. I mean, and that's a whole other story that I won't get into, but there was a lot of grieving around that because I lost about 18 people. I worked in Wall Street. So 9/11 is a really highly charged, difficult day for me to this day, like all these 20 some odd years later. So then, there's a process. Thankfully, right after I talked to the gentleman who did my scans, I apologize for not remembering what kind of doctor that is. I got a phone call from a woman named Mary Heary at Neurological Hospital. She, at the time, ran the Smiler Breast Cancer Center, which was fabulous. She was a doctorate level nurse with a lot of knowledge around how we deal with the emotions around breast cancer. And there were groups and things. There were a lot of supports in place at Neurological Hospital. I give them so much credit, all the credit in the world. I actually did, in fact, see a doctor like the 17th or 18th. So it was very fast. But then I had to have a series of tests. And it just so happened, being 49, having family history of breast cancer and something else that I've forgotten what it was, I was able to actually get the BRCA gene test, which was a way to determine for me, was I going to get a total mastectomy or was I going to do a lumpectomy? And there were some more factors in there, and I met with the breast surgeon and everything went very quickly. Some of what happens, I think, is you're so in the fight, so to speak. You're so deep in the weeds and the woods, there is really no time to grieve. You gotta stay alive, right? You're doing stuff. And I have a 10-year-old, right? And then I gotta help her process grief and how that's gonna look. And that's a whole other discussion. Thankfully, her pediatrician, I called her pediatrician and I said, I've got to drop this bomb on her. How do I go about doing this? And she said, you're not going to believe this. I have a book called like When Mommy and Daddy Tell You They Have Cancer. I was like, what? Okay, great. And I got the book from her. And the next thing she said was, do you know what my husband does? And I don't know what your husband does. He's a doctor. She said he is the guy at the time, Stanford Hospital, doing MRIs, et cetera, specifically around breast cancer. I'm talking to him now. Hold for a sec. She came back. She said, okay, so 2 mornings from then at 8 a.m., you're going to be here and he's going to do this and it's done. It's set. You're going. And I'm like, what? And where that was great was the MRI was so clear and had so much information and was such an incredible tool that I only had to have 1 lymph node removed as opposed to 4 or 5. And I have lymphedema. I can't imagine how much worse the lymphedema would be if I'd had to have 4 or 5 nodes out. Lots of people do. I because of this incredible MRI, my surgeon said, hey, we can see all clear. We're taking 1 just to be safe, but that's it. So then the next piece of this is sort of grief number 2. And that one was more intensive. So the first one I thought, well, I've got to do a lumpectomy and radiation. We got this, no problem, right? And it wasn't till the results, I guess I called to find out about it. I guess they called me and said, here's your BRCA gene results. I said, great. So this is super. We're ready to go. I'm doing the lumpectomy. Everything's great. Only thing I haven't heard is whether or not I'm positive for HER2 new. And they said, well, we have those results here. We'll get them for you. So they came back and they said, you're actually positive. And that's when everything came crashing down, because that meant I was going to have chemo. And to me, cancer with radiation, lumpectomy, manageable. Cancer with chemo, I was going to have a whole different life. Really, really hard. And that was way worse than finding out I had cancer. I can even feel myself getting emotional about it now because I remember how intense it was. And it was just like, I thought I was going to kind of skate through, and I wasn't going to skate through. It ended up being the world's biggest blessing, because when they did the lumpectomy and I was under, the doctor said afterwards, we had a real moment there where we had to decide what we were going to do, because we could only get to the margin at the backside because it was too far into your muscle wall, your skeleton wall, and too close to your heart to risk going beyond the margin. And you want to be beyond the margin on 6, is it cube 6 sides? Yes. 6 sides. That was hilarious. I'm so in the emotions, I'm forgetting things like 6 sides. So I was beyond the margin at 5 sides and to the margin at 1 side. And she said, I was able to make the decision knowing that you were going to have chemo, not to remove the breast. And as well, that's why I had you be my surgeon, because I knew someone had to make decisions when I'm out. What are they going to do? Wake you up? Hi, honey. Are we losing this one, or are we going to keep it? What do you want to do?
Well, aside from which, never mind having to wake you out of anesthesia, but having somebody who can look at the situation non-emotionally,
right,
is huge.
Right.
Because, we are so involved and so emotional.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see who stepped up to really help. I had some wonderful supports. It was just incredible. Meal trains created by 2 moms at my daughter's school who weren't my bestie moms. My bestie mom was the first one to step up, say, we're taking her away for a weekend so you and Bob have time to process and get things in place and blah, blah, blah. She said our girls went to dance classes at the same location, different classes, same time, same day. So she would drive, and if I felt well enough, I hopped in the car with her and we went and we had a drink. I had a mocktail, and then we would pick up the girls from dance, but I didn't have to drive, which was a huge help. Ladies from my church, etc. I was really careful about who I chose to go with me to chemo. My husband couldn't go every time. There was just no way. It was going to suck out all his vacation time. So he was there for surgery. He was there for some other things. My sister-in-law was able to take a day off to take me when I had to have my portacath put in, because they started by just saying, we're going to use a vein. Well, my veins are more pronounced now than they were back then. And after the first time, I got hysterical and I said, I'm not doing another chemo treatment till you give me a portacath. You got to really say what you need over and even at a great, great hospital, you've got to say what you need and let people know what's going on. So let me now get to the grieving part of this, because of course it's kind of after. So I've gotten through chemo, radiation, and I'm now in a brain training class where they help you. And by the way, all this is free. It's all offered from the hospital. It's wonderful. The resources are unbelievable. So it's like a 6-week course, and they're helping you, like, here are some strategies to remember words. Here's this, here's that. And I'm sitting in there, and a woman is discussing a pork chop and how she had been making pork chops, and I'm making this up, marinated them, put them in the bag with the marinade. And then she could not find the pork chop. She had no idea where these pork chops were. And I'm a Weisenheimer, folks. I'm going to be the first to admit it. And I normally would have said something, call for pizza, who cares? When it starts to smell, you'll find it, right? That's me. Like, I am sobbing at the table, just tears pouring down my face. I am devastated that she has lost her pork chop. There's no reason to be devastated over a lost pork chop. It's just not.
No.
But it was good, because it meant something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong, and I don't know what it is. And I went straight to Mary Harry, and I said, something's wrong. And I told her the situation, and she said, yeah, we're going to get you straight into our person who's our MSW, Masters of Social Work, who helps people like you discuss things. And so I met with her, and I told her the situation. And she said, how long have you been like this? And I'm like, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. It's just really been hard. I had gone back to my therapist. He had said, you're coming back to therapy while you're going through cancer. You're going to be talking about really heavy stuff, and your kid and your husband aren't going to be able to handle it. So come here, vent it out, because they can't. It's going to be too much for them. So that was a good thing that I had a place to go vent. And I recommend that for anyone who's going through this. And if you don't have a private therapist, they have support groups. You can go. So at any rate, the woman who is the Masters of Social Work said, let me see when I can get you in. We actually have a oncological psychiatrist on staff, and I'm going to hope that the psychiatrist is the one that can prescribe meds. I get these words confused. So believe it or not, I was able to see him the very next day. I have no idea how. It was unbelievable. I mean, talk about I had cancellation or something, and I was able to get right in. And I had been through anxiety and depression, so I knew which meds I could take and which meds I couldn't. And he said, you have to understand, cancer, I don't buy it, I think it's chemo. Cancer has reopened a pathway in your brain that is causing you to feel depressed, and probably, like, quite honestly, I hadn't grieved yet, right? So I was grieving this whole friggin' thing. I had no hair. I was bald. I had a friend who was at a party who was drunk, who told someone that the only reason I shaved my head was to get attention. No, you shave your head because each time you pull out a clump of hair, it's freaking devastating. And finally, you're like, you know what? Today's the day. I'm just taking it all off. One time, let's get this bad boy over with and be bald. Fine. Just done. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of things people say. I had someone who said to me, you need to examine where in your life spiritually you aren't healed. So if it's close to your heart, it's about your heart, and you need to look into that, because, basically I had brought it upon myself. Deep breath in as you try not to explode, because, we bring cancer on ourselves. I mean, are there things we can do to make sure we don't get breast cancer again? Like exercising, eating less sugar, doing these things? Of course. Do I do those things? Of course. But I don't think we bring cancer on ourselves. I'm just not buying into that at all. But, there I am. Like, I don't know. I have to really examine what I did wrong emotionally to bring on cancer. And anyway, not a fan. Like, imagine like your 2-year-old has cancer. What did they do to bring on cancer? It just gets me really angry. So there was that grieving process. And that was really after I'd been through chemo. And at that point I was doing Herceptin treatments every 3 weeks. So I was seeing this oncological psychiatrist, put on a medication to help me cope. I did say I want the very lowest dose. I want to see how I do. I don't want to start high and then that was fine. He was great with that. I said I'm going to start low and try to stay low. And then a whole series of stuff happened with family, with our daughter, where she then was processing her emotions, and so I had hardly gotten out of the woods. Then I was in full blown momming to help my daughter, who had been the world's greatest little trooper. She every night I'd be, tucking her in bed. She was 10, and she would take her hand and she would like rub it on the little bit of hair that was coming in, and or back here usually, and she'd say, "Mom, it's like a little fuzzy duck butt." And it became our little moniker for the thing, like fuzzy duck butt, this little bit of hair. And interestingly, and I won't get too long into it, but I kind of have a hair story from growing up. And so cutting my hair was quite traumatizing. And having my head completely shaved healed a lot of that, because I had really amazing people with me when I was doing it. And then I made a decision. I'm a different person now, and I did not grow my hair out again. And you'd be amazed how many people said, "Well, what about your husband? Doesn't he love you with long hair? Don't you want to go back to long hair for your husband?" And I said, "My husband is happy I'm alive. He doesn't really care what my hair looks like." And I said, not to mention, in a way, he got to marry multiple women, because so far I've been a blonde with longer hair. I've been bald. I went gray. I had to go kind of brunette as the gray was growing out, and I'm blonde again. It's a good life. He's had multiple wives. You're like, do you approach it with like the shutdown, or with the humor, or with both? I usually choose kind of a little of both.
I was going to say, I just did a Facebook Live on what do you do when people are inappropriate. And so, teaching people to prepare in advance, knowing that, I don't want to say people are stupid, but we're thoughtless. And
we are,
often,
we were so afraid of scary things that we don't know how to react
right.
or respond.
But if
Sorry
we
to
can
interrupt
prepare,
you. I'm going to forget.
if we can prepare ourselves,
Right.
then that helps. So practice saying things in response. And sometimes being humorous helps, and sometimes it's not the right thing with that person.
Right.
So you just have to go by situation.
And I would also say, when you offer help, don't say, "What can I do to help you?" Say, "I'd be happy to pick up the groceries for you next time I'm out with my family. What's your favorite meal?" I would be delighted to. Has anyone started a meal train for you? I'd like to put my name on for a couple meals. Like my girlfriend who said, "I'm driving your daughter to dance." It wasn't a discussion. I'm driving your daughter to dance. The people who said, "We'd like to start a meal train for you."
One of the
In a crisis, you can't think. I have no idea what I need. I would have loved someone to do the laundry, in retrospect.
and that's one. The other thing is, like, for those people who live in the Northeast or another place where you need to put different tires on your car. The season's changing. Can I take your car and have your snow tires put on?
Beautiful.
Or you need an inspection, or can I fill the tank up with gas for you? But don't expect somebody who's grieving or going through an illness to be able to think that far in advance. And if
Go ahead.
you're the person who's going through it, before you have surgery, before you do whatever, try to think of the things that you do regularly that would help if you could have somebody else do, and make a list. Make a list of the foods that you always have in your house.
Right.
And I think of my mother, who would have people come, and there was nothing wrong with them except they were old and decrepit. My stepfather was 103. But it was like, my mother would have an aide come and go do food shopping, and then she did nothing but complain about what this poor person would buy. And I'm like, well, did you tell her you only use this brand of coffee or this type of milk? If you didn't, then you can't be upset for them buying you whatever, whether it was the least expensive because they're worried about your money, or it was the one that's on sale. If you don't say, "I only use Skippy peanut butter," and they buy you Peter Pan, oh well.
Yeah,
So you need to be specific. And when you're healthy is the time to think about it.
absolutely. All these things, by the way, I'm a trustworthy expert, which is a group that helps you put all these documents in place and have them together. So living wills, I can never remember the other. It's POA. I'm forgetting what that's called.
Power of attorney.
Thank you.
Um,
You know what? I've learned there's a lot of words I lose, and I just don't freak out about it. We're going to go there next. I just want to do one last thing on here because my husband's friends, he had a group of like 5 buddies, and they were over and they dropped off flowers and doing all these things. And they said, "We want to know what's the best way we can help you." And I said, "The best way you can help me is take him out and get his mind off this." And every couple of weeks, they'd grab him, they'd take him out to dinner, they would, watch a baseball match on TV, whatever it was. Actually, by that time, it was football season. And they just got him out of the house. And that meant everything to me because it's not just about the patient being taken care of, it's also their family. There's, my husband needed a freaking break. It was hard. He was having to help me. And there were nights that I was so sick that I was wearing Depends to bed. I mean, that's not a lot of fun. Sorry, let's talk about the reality, right? Now I want to transition a little bit because the story of how I find out I have ADHD actually comes directly out of that brain training. So we'll shift this to a happier story. So the brain training, I realized like I wasn't in some ways getting better. Now I'm going to just say there is a hormone element to women's ADHD, and our estrogen acts kind of like the lubricant on the brakes, on the works of our brains. And when we fluctuate with our cycles, you'll have better times with brain power and lesser times. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to get too deep into this. But the bottom line is this: when you're going through breast cancer, if you have the kind I did triple positive, which means HER2/neu, estrogen, and progesterone, they are shutting those hormones down as fast as they can. Now, I was 49. I was already getting into menopause, but menopause now on speed, right? And you're putting chemo in your body, which is chemicals, and there's all this kind of stuff going on. And so my brain was just not working right. And maybe it was a blessing because I was really proactive and I was like, there's something up with my brain. Concurrently, now I've got a, say, 12-year-old and finding challenges in school, etc. And from sort of 50-ish to 55, I just was saying I have executive function challenges. And that was helpful. It wasn't until I was about 55, after, the 55th client said, "Hey, how do you know you have ADHD? You're not diagnosed." How do I know? I don't know, because I'm working with ADHD people. But I did go and get a diagnosis. And by go and get, I went online and did an online form. I would not recommend this for 99.9% of people. Please go see someone. I was deep in training around ADHD and a very good sense of who I am. I am very honest. And if you're going to do one of these online forums, you have to be really, really honest. So I had to talk about childhood trauma, ACEs, the therapy I'd been through, et cetera. It was a huge process. It was very hard. The hardest part of it was writing the bit about the school and what people said, because I truly was just openly weeping, with relief, with gratitude, with rage. Ultimately, oh my gosh, the rage. I was so angry. And then, that's right. We can talk about the grief cycle, but we all Kubler-Ross and the 5, it might be 6 now, stages of grief.
None of them are right.
Okay, we'll take that. There is, and by the way, they're not in any order. Who knows? Tomorrow you could be a whole different thing.
I just want to clarify this, not just for you, but for everybody. Kubler-Ross, when she did her research and her study, was talking to patients who had been diagnosed and given basically a life sentence or a death sentence.
Right.
So when she was talking about angry, accepting, all of these stages, they're not of the survivor or the loved ones. They're for the patient.
Wow.
And most people have read the stages and have been taught that this is what the griever goes through.
Right. Maybe,
Nope.
maybe not.
Right.
How interesting. See, now I
And,
want to learn more about that.
and it was never really intended to be steps.
Right.
It's a spiral. And
Yeah.
you go up a little bit and then you come down and then you up and down and stop
Right.
all over the place. And yeah,
Right.
it's very messy.
It is very messy. And it was messy. The process was messy, the
Mhm.
figuring out, because there was tremendous relief. I'm not broken. And then you have to wait, obviously, to get your diagnosis. And the thing I did online, which I think was ADHDonline.com, I think, it was a certified, licensed, all the things person reviews your documents and then makes the diagnosis. So it's not some 2-bit fly by night fun little quiz for $15 on the internet. This is
Yeah.
like the real deal with real people reviewing it. I did it that way because one, it takes a long time to get a diagnosis appointment. Two, I believe we were in COVID, which meant it was a lot harder to get a diagnosis appointment. And I mostly did it just to kind of like be able to say I have diagnosed ADHD so that I could sort of quiet the naysayers.
Each time we're grieving, it depends on what we're grieving,
Right.
how close a relationship it was with that person, place, or thing. Um, Everybody's different. So
Yeah,
two siblings losing the same parent are going to grieve
totally.
completely differently.
Yeah.
They had different relationships with the person.
I had such an interesting experience grieving my father-in-law, who I adore, who had cancer. And so I was kind of his cancer buddy. We did not have it at the same time. And he would often ask me questions. And I had this great honor and privilege of being with him not long before he was dying, and kind of shifting my life to be there. It's a long story that's too long for this. And what was so beautiful about it was when he died, I felt so complete. He was at peace. He had lived an incredibly good life. We had had a wonderful relationship together. Yes, I get sad, but I don't have disharmonious feelings around it. I know he's in a better situation for him. By the end, he was in pain, and nobody wishes anybody pain. Just an interesting little thought around grieving. I did a lot of therapy, went through a lot to be able to deal with the various diagnoses I've had. I actually didn't have any therapy around ADHD diagnosis. I ended up doing like a 6-week coaching session with a coach who's more advanced than I am in ADHD, who's really been in the block and I have tremendous respect for. And kind of did a 6-week thing with her. And I got to the end and I was like, I'm good. Actually, she's the reason I got diagnosed. I went in not having had the diagnosis yet. She's like, what's your goal? And I said, to get diagnosed. And she's like, okay, here's how you do it. And I just went and got it done. And, I didn't really have, I don't know, I had a lot of tools, and I was in coaching school at the time. So we were coaching one another, and we were, I was coaching people and I was being coached. So I really had a lot of supports in place. And I think if I say nothing else, if I had one giant takeaway from this entire conversation is you need supports in your life, however that looks. The healthy kind of supports, right? I'm not talking about like sitting down with a bottle of whiskey at 1:00 in the afternoon. I'm talking about
that's not support. That's avoidance.
that's really terrifying, right? And yes, avoidant. I love that word. That's a great word. The supports, like the people who you surround yourself with, the environment you're in, any structures you need to put in place, that list that you suggested people write. Put these things in place for yourself, ideally before the what hits the fan. Because in the crisis, you got nothing. You're just
And that's any type of crisis.
absolutely.
You don't want to be making potentially life altering decisions when you're in crisis.
Absolutely.
I told you my stepfather was 103 3/4 when he died. He was about 100 when he fell and broke his femur.
Oh,
And I remember talking with him and my mother saying, you guys really need to think about moving out of the place that you're living in. They owned a condo that was on the second floor. It was a walk up. And
hey.
then, and then in the basement, which was indoors, they went down 2 flights of stairs. That's where the washing machine and dryer were.
Right.
And my mother, who was quite a bit younger, still is lugging things up and down. She had had 2 hip replacements by then, needed knee replacements and refused to do them. And I'm like, you can't be doing this. You need to make a decision, and you need to make the decision when you're in a good frame of mind and physically not in crisis. Why would they listen to their daughter who was a social worker, who worked in home health care and with geriatric populations? I kept trying, they wouldn't listen to me. We finally got them to move into a senior residence, and they were there 2 days. I think it was the second evening for dinner. My mother fell walking 10 steps from their apartment door into the dining room, indoors, broke her femur, ended up in the hospital. 3 days after that, my stepfather called me and says, I really think I have pneumonia. And I'm like, you've got a cold. He's like, no, I think I have pneumonia. And I'm like, okay, call an ambulance and let's get you to the hospital. Of course, it's 9 o'clock at night. He goes in, they do a chest x-ray. He's got pneumonia.
Wow.
So the two of them were in a room together at the hospital for a few days. My mother was discharged. She's like, well, I'll just go home. I'm like, you're not going home. You can't walk. You
Heck
got
no.
to wait there. So I got her into a rehab. And a few days after that, he's released into the same room in the
Right.
nursing home with her.
Goodness gracious.
And they're like, okay, when they discharge us, we'll go home. And I'm like, no, we found a new place for you. You're staying here. And they were in assisted living for about 2 years. And then they died within 3 months of each other.
Wow.
But it's like, you could have avoided a lot of this if you had moved when you were healthier
Right.
into a one level place without nope. So, yes.
I hear you loud and clear. I've had to do some of this myself. So, yeah, like thankfully next door, my parents, they now have an elevator. They don't use it often, but at least they put the groceries and the packages and the things on the elevator so they're not carrying things up the stairs. And sometimes they do use the elevator, which is great. I'm glad they have it. It's a safety feature. And
Exactly.
I'm delighted. And they actually live when they're not here, they're at the beach half the year. The other half of the, and by the beach, I mean next door to me. But the other half of the year, they are in Florida in a CCRC. So they have they have all the resources they need right there, which is fabulous. And I really like that. And I like it because I told them the greatest gift they ever gave me was that I can sleep at night. And when something happens, and a couple times things I have the great gift of being able to be a daughter, not a caregiver.
I wish I could have said that the same thing, because once they were in assisted living, I got called many times. He's on his way to the emergency room. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll put some clothes on and go meet him at the ER.
That's been my in-laws. And so I've lived that too. And I have no doubt as my parents, I mean, they're very, very healthy, but there will come a time when they are not. And yes, I'll be getting those calls, but at least, there's someone there to help them until you can get there. And
Yes.
that's a gift.
It is. We have been talking a very long time, and I want to sort of bring us back to what kind of grief is there when you get a diagnosis of ADHD or ADD? Is it?
I mean, everybody's unique and different. For me, the grief was what could have been. What if I'd had the same structural support so that I could have been a national honor student like my daughter? And by the way, fascinatingly, when she became a national honor student, I was over the moon ecstatic for her. I was sure I was going to be jealous and everything else, and I wasn't at all. I was delighted that she got something that I had dreamed of as a child. So there was mostly that, what could have been, and why didn't I get that? And that's okay. You got to honor those feelings. They're just what they are. And I do have that benefit of knowing that society didn't think girls had ADHD. I can't really fault anybody. It's nobody's fault. So that helps. I'm trying to think if there was anything else with the grieving process around ADHD. I mean, that was really it. It was kind of like it was so much the answer to everything. It was a chance to drop this burden down of I'm dysfunctional, I have something wrong with me, I'm broken, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm crazy, and just say no, I'm not. I just have different wiring. And so there was way more relief than there was grief, but there was grief, and it's valid. I mean, to look back and say, hey, what if?
What I'm hearing is grief that things had to be more difficult than they had to be, or they were more difficult than they had to be.
Yes, I think that's beautifully stated.
I could just make the analogy of when I found out I had uterine cancer and had to have a complete hysterectomy, although they left one lymph node in because I had an asthma attack on the operating room table.
Oh,
So they
goodness.
decided I was out for long enough. They were going that the lymph nodes looked fine,
Right,
but I laughed. But like the few friends who were there to support me, because my husband had passed away years before that, I didn't want my mother to know. I didn't want her to have to deal with it. But they're like, "Aren't you really upset?" And I'm like, "Take it all." I was never able to get pregnant. I said, "So my uterus functioned not at all. I didn't need it.
right,
Go, goodbye." And I was almost giddy.
right.
And they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "It didn't serve any purpose. It's sort of like my appendix
Yeah,
or, whatever, another organ, my tonsils that I still have that, who cares? They don't do anything."
right.
There are reasons to grieve over health diagnoses. And
Yes.
then there are times that it doesn't make sense to you, and that's okay too.
Yeah,
Just like if we didn't have a close relationship or we had a horrible relationship with somebody and they pass away, it might not be societally nice,
yeah,
but if you don't want to grieve over somebody who abused you, for example, don't grieve.
yeah,
You know, it's individual.
absolutely.
So, okay. So,
That was pride.
Catherine, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
Best to go to my website, catherineavery.com,
And it's
and
Catherine with a C.
CATHERINEAVERY.com. I did that really fast, but we'll write it somewhere in show notes, I'm
We
sure. I would love to hear from people. I'm very open about my story. I'm involved in a couple of groups that have to do with cancer survivors, so I can connect people with things like that. And of course, I can connect people with the land of ADHD and how to help you with your neurodivergency. So uh, those are my lanes. I hold no other lanes. Those are my lanes.
And I know you just started a group, but I'm guessing that it's sort of a rotating group that you start every few months.
Well, I have a membership group
Okay.
that people can start at any time, which is accountability and monthly video content, and it's really fun. They're called Productivity Power Hour, and we take an hour to co-work together quietly. Which is really helpful for people who have ADHD. We bring the tasks we really don't want to do. So, like for me, I bring taxes to Power Hour, and I get that done.
Well, thank you so much. This has been
Oh,
very educational, very enlightening, and I hope lots of people reach out to you with their questions, whether they're about neurospiciness
Mhm.
or about cancer. And I will have to have you back for
Thanks so
more.
much. I love that.
Thanks so much. And everybody else, remember, go out and make it a great day. It's up to you. See you next time. If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner-Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner-Lesser. Thanks again.